Well, I'm happy to be here today with Rob Reyes, longtime St. Louis and national sports reporter. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm good, Dale. How are you?
Well, I'm doing good, and it just seems like a perfect time to talk about baseball with spring training beginning, and just seems like the sense is in the air, going to be warm this weekend, and so just wanted to know how you're looking at baseball in 2016. What do you see going on?
Well, I mean, like everybody else, I'm intrigued to see what happens with the Cubs. You know, I know that a lot of national people have, picked them as the team to beat in the National League as well as in all of baseball, and saying this might be the final year they actually could get to a World Series and potentially even win one. But I still have my doubts. I still don't think that's as perfect a team as everybody else, and I know that Cardinals are motivated to try to knock them off after the disappointment of the playoffs last year. So I think it's going to be a fascinating race. I think the National League Central is certainly the best division in baseball. And I'm really, really going to be curious to see how it all plays out.
Well, they might do as well as the Nationals from 2015, who were clearly the odds-on best team in baseball from all the writers,
Or the Dodgers in any of the last 20 years that you care to pick, It's funny. I mean, it's like baseball is such an intriguing game to me, and it's always been such a fascinating game to study, is because it has some, winning and losing has so much more to do than with just whatever the individual, talents of the players involved on a particular team. And you never know how injuries are going to affect the team. You never know how, bad something off the field performance that's going to affect something. I mean, there's just so many different things that can happen that can change the outcome. That's why it's always, you never know. And anybody, I know I have friends who, actually place wagers on baseball games. To me, I can't think of anything, more ridiculous in my life, because if you could predict how a baseball game is going to turn out to win money on it, you're a better man than me.
Well, and of course, when you're in St. Louis, you look at the Cubs through the prism of the rivalry, and the also maybe the prism of the Cubs fan, which is also just as interesting. And so it'll be very interesting to see. I mean, they've got a great group of young hitters, and now they're the hunted and not the hunter, and we'll see what difference that has to bring to this.
Yeah, and I think there is a difference. I mean, I think their team. You have to find a way to win. I mean, you have to find a way to learn how to win, and that is a skill that they don't teach you, in baseball 101 coming up through the minor leagues. And I think it's something that you have to learn individually on your own, and that's one of the things I'm interested to see what happens with all these young players on the Cubs. I'll say this: I think it's great for baseball that the Cubs are a better team, that they're more competitive, and go into the season with a chance to win, because it certainly makes for more compelling games. When the Cardinals and Cubs meet for the first time in mid-April at Busch Stadium this year, I mean, that's going to be the place to be. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun.
What else do you see around baseball? What else kind of intrigues you?
Well, I guess some of the free agent movement over the year, over the off season. I think Arizona's a much improved club. I think that it's interesting to see what happens with the Yankees for the first time ever. I don't think they signed a single free agent. The Red Sox are much better. We talk about the Cubs and Cardinals. Certainly, there's no games that get people's angst up more than the Yankees, and that's going to be the case again this year. So just kind of the overall landscape of the game, I guess. That can the Dodgers actually win when they're supposed to every year. So it's I think clubs like the Astros intrigue me, that may come from where they were to become a playoff caliber team. I don't like what's happening with the trend in baseball that you see. The Astros started it actually with the whole rebuilding mode and stripping down to nothing to kind of start over again. And it's going on in Milwaukee and Cincinnati and Philadelphia, Atlanta. I mean, I don't like that. I don't think that's good for the game. I understand why they're doing it. I understand the motivation behind doing it, but it's, if you're a fan of one of those, 4 teams right now, what are you looking forward to? You have to have something to get excited about, and I don't think there's anything in either of those 4 cities to get excited about.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see, because certainly those American League playoffs last year, when the Royals and Astros and all those things, and going to be interested to see how the Royals do this year again.
Yeah, and there again, you talk about a team that's kind of changed its mojo a little bit. I mean, they're like what 4 1 swing or 3 outs or something away from being back-to-back World Series champions. So
yeah,
I think that's kind of fascinating to watch too. So it'll be can they keep that up? That's also another thing to watch. You're right.
well, and I want to make sure that I emphasize a book that I had a chance to read over the past few days, and it sounds like it's coming out real soon, and it ties into all of this. Tell me about your new book.
Yeah, it's called Taking Flight, the St. Louis Cardinals in the Building of Baseball's Best Franchise from Triumph Books. It should be in stores in early March. And it's kind of a look at, I spent most of the last season kind of wandering through the Cardinal farm system, talking to a lot of different people, some scouts as well, and kind of just how the Cardinals go about their business and what makes them so successful. And I think it all starts with, the scouting of players and how they do that. It starts with the player development. It starts with the managers, and it's the players themselves. It's kind of a cross section of individuals, high draft picks, undrafted players, players coming back from injury, how they do that. So there's got a bunch of different stories that we get into and kind of tell them from the personal side of what makes this organization tick and why they are, year in and year out so successful.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's broken into profiles, not only of some of the most famous Cardinals, but also minor leaguers who will probably never see the light of day on the Busch Stadium field. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And you've got people that have been kind of question mark names like Aldemus Diaz and a number of other people that are people that Cardinal fans might have heard of, but certainly haven't seen much out of them yet. And so what were some of the ones that you found to be the most interesting when you were doing the writing?
I guess kind of a cross-section of different guys. You mentioned Diaz, obviously the player who fled Cuba to kind of pursue a baseball dream, and kind of how that whole story evolved. And you got a guy like Mitch Harris, who, Cardinal fans did get to know last year as he, made his Major League debut, and obviously the long commitment he had to the Navy after graduating from the Naval Academy before even beginning his professional career. We tried to detail his story. Alex Reyes, of course, the, universal player ranked as the top prospect in the organization. Get into his story a little bit. And then there's kind of guys like a Blake McKnight or a Davis Ward or Colin Raddick, Derek Gibson. I mean, guys, you said probably are not household names for a lot of Cardinal fans, but to me, they've got interesting stories to tell, and they're part of the overall story of what makes this organization successful, how they go about their business of getting guys like that and how they mix and contribute to the organization. Like you said, even if they never reach the major leagues, they're still contributing to the success of the organization. A guy like Dirk Kenny, who's an area scout for the Cardinals, lives in Kansas City. Brian Hopkins, who's a cross-checker that lives in North Carolina. I've talked, spent some time with both of those guys and kind of what they do and how they go about doing it. And then the managers, like Oliver Marmel, who's the manager at Palm Beach now, does a great job. Mike Schild, who's at Memphis. Mark DeJean, who's a longtime field coordinator. And all these guys are basically disciples of George Kissel, and that's how kind of you can trace the lineage of this organization, this success they've had all the way back to the 1940s and stuff, and that is a tribute to George Kissel and the people that he put in place and who've taught the instructors who are in place now, who are teaching the players, who will pass those lessons on to the next generation.
Well, and if someone is not as familiar with the story of quote unquote the Cardinal Way, tell me a little bit about George Kissel. He was never a major leaguer, so why was he important?
Because he was a teacher, and he was another guy who understood the fundamentals of the game. And people, the one thing I'll say about the Cardinal Way is that people kind of got a misconception a few years ago when, I guess probably starting with the 2011, 2012 success that this team had, that when such a big deal was made about it, that it was all more of a moralistic kind of approach to the game. And I really don't think that's correct. I mean, Cardinals do have a lot of guys who have very high values and very high morals and good Christian, leadership. Start with Mike Matheny on down, but I think the Cardinal Way principles are more about the fundamentals, about how to play the game and how to do things the right way, how to be a professional on and off the field. Everything kind of stems from that. The same game plan from the highest level down to the lowest level of the organization. They do their relay drills the same way. They do cut down run down plays the same way. I mean, just the overall kind of theme of everything within the organization and how they all dress the same as far as red T-shirts and socks and, no beards and long mustaches. Everything that this is done from the higher ups on down is carried out throughout every level of the organization. And that to me is kind of what separates this club a little bit from some of the other organizations. Everybody has, there's a Cubs way, there's a Red Sox way, there's an Orioles way. Everybody has kind of their own way of doing things. But I think it's just that the success the Cardinals have had was because of the fundamentals that, the drills and stuff that George Kissel laid out. They actually have a manual that, most of the people in the minor leagues follow. They're still the same drills that this team ran in the 40s and 50s when George was running the farm system. So, he just understood how to motivate people. He understood how to, that baseball was not a exact science, that there was, but there was also more than one way to do things. And if you had success doing something, he wasn't necessarily going to mess with you, but he also wanted you to understand what you were doing and why you were doing it, and then what it takes to be successful doing it.
Well, and do you think that, of course, I think that it's just like anything else in the modern media, that they take the thing that sounds like you're taking the moral high ground and kind of run with that. But the thing that I found so interesting from reading the profiles of these men that are now, Kissel was a contemporary and was signed by the Cardinals at the same time that Musial is starting his career and Red Shamings and those things. But
right.
His disciples, the people that interacted with him and still are espousing the things that he said are the modern players. It's Yadier Molina. It's all these other people that are very much a part of today's game. And I think that may be that lineage, I think, is the thing that makes it the most interesting.
Yeah, Cardinal fans are probably not going to know the name Steve Turco, but he's spent the last 7 years managing the lowest level farm system that the Cardinals have in the United States, the Gulf Coast League, which is where all the young rookie players, especially those out of high school or small colleges, go to start their careers, and the Latin players, for the most part, start out there, and they play it on the backfields of the spring training complex. There's no scoreboard, there's no lights. They play at noon on July and August afternoons when it's 95 plus degrees out there. There's maybe 10 people in the stands watching you. It is a really basic, fundamental level of baseball, and probably guys who came from higher profile programs in high school and college are, what the heck have I got myself into? This is pro baseball, So that's the challenge that he has, is to get those guys trained. But he was one of George's disciples, and he knows that level is really important to the transition of guys to become pros, and he's really good at that level with teaching and with working with guys and wearing multiple hats on how to deal with guys. I was there one time last year with him in his office, and the guy came in and said, somebody had stolen a pair of sunglasses. And there was there one time in his office last year when the guy was saying he got a text message from a player that had been there for 2 days, a guy they signed as a non-drafted player. He said he wasn't for him, he was going to go home. There's just different, things, everything like that you have to deal with. That it's a long way away from St. Louis and the major league success of a club, but it's still where the foundation is laid and where it all begins.
Well, and so I think it's a really fascinating book, and Taking Flight is it just going to be locally? Can we get it on the internet? Where should we be looking for that?
Available now for pre-orders on Amazon. As I said, it should be in stores sometime around the 1st of March. The official launch date is April 1st, but it should be in stores, a few weeks before that. So you certainly, if they don't see it in your local bookstore, you could ask about it. But also, as I say, available on BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon, anywhere you can find books online. It should be available, or directly from the publisher, which is TriumphBooks.com.
Well, and I think it'll be a good kind of spring training read. Get you back into the the feeling of baseball and all that I'm certainly excited about now. And tell me about this year's team. What do you expect out of the Cardinals, and who are some people to look for?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting club. I think in a lot of ways, that people have talked about everything that was the left over the winter, Hayward and Lackey primarily going to the Cubs. But I'll say this, I just don't see any way John Lackey could be as good this year, even if he stayed in St. Louis, than he was a year ago. He's 37 years old and just had a phenomenal season, and I don't think he's going to be the same pitcher at Chicago that he was in St. Louis. And Hayward is one of those guys that's kind of a polarizing figure. You either love him or hate him, but I just don't think he's the kind of player that would be a leadership role player on this club, and certainly the guy that you'd have to pay more money than you paid any other player in franchise history to get him to stay. And, you know, we'll see what he does. I just think that Piscotty and Grichuk, if they're healthy, are going to be just as effective over the course of the season as Hayward is, for certainly a lot less money. And they got to figure out, you know, if Moss or Adams is going to be the first baseman. I mean, they have questions, but I like the talent on this club. I think they're not going anywhere.
Well, and I think that the Hayward discussion certainly brings, you know, very clearly into focus the issue about how what the value of the sabermetrics is and the statistics, as opposed to how you would have viewed a player 20, 30, well, maybe even 10 years ago. And I certainly don't think that you would have seen the kind of offers that were made by the Cardinals as well to Jason Hayward that many years ago. And
yeah, I'm still an old school guy, and I understand the value of the new statistics and all that kind of stuff. But to me, you still get two things. You're going to pay the Cubs are going to pay a guy $22 million a year who's never driven in 100 runs in a season or scored 100 runs. And,
right.
and that to me is a staggering figure. You know, I mean, I think the thing about the Cardinals too is that you talk about guys like Wainwright, you talk about Holiday, you talk about Molina. Okay, it's a quote unquote the aging core, according to Jason Hayward when he signed with the Cubs. I don't think I want any of those three guys mad at me. I mean, I don't think I want any of those three guys to me. I'm going to tell them something that they can't do. I think the motivation level for this team is very, very high, and it starts with those three guys.
Well, and you know, I mean, I think it's just very interesting to me because, you know, having played at least through high school, I have been on teams and understand, you know, how personalities are just bigger and more important than, you know, in some places than in others. But I also, you know, you can't tell me that runs batted in is not an important stat, like, you know, some people want to do, and I just don't understand that take on baseball at all.
To me, it reminds me of the stat that people say, well, wins is not important for a pitcher. You know,
yeah.
Well, to me, it's how you win the game. You know, I mean, it's the difference between, you know, going to the playoffs and not going to play. I mean, I understand some wins, all wins are not equal. I do understand that. I mean, a guy comes in and throws one pitch in the relief role, gets a double play ball, his team scores 3 runs in the bottom of the inning, he gets a win. I understand that that's not the same as a guy who goes out and throws 120 pitches and allows 2 hits and 10 strikes out, you know, 15 guys, and he gets a win. And on the basic level of, you know, the total, you know, piece of paper, those two wins equal out, and I understand that they don't. But to me, you know, I still want I want a starting pitcher going out there that can win me 15 to 20 games a year, and I don't care what the rest of the statistics say.
Anytime that I'm confronted with that statement about wins, I remember Jose De Leon, who would always pitch just well enough to lose. You know, if the other pitcher gave up 3 runs, he was going to give up 4. If it might be a night where he'd give up 1 run and the other pitcher would throw a shutout. But I think you have to hearken back no further than 1988 or 89 to see the value or the mindset or whatever it is that could cause someone to just constantly be good enough to lose.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's interesting. You know, the statistics have evolved and changed so much of the game, but I still think you just have to, you know, and I guess it's kind of the throwback to what we talked about with the first part of the show about why the Cardinals are different than other clubs. I think they understand the value of you know, old school approaches to the game. I mean, yes, they're probably one of the organizations that, and certainly, you know, early on blended the new world and sabermetrics and analytics and all that kind of stuff with the old school approach, but they've never forgotten where they came from. And they understand the importance of having scouts in the field and watching guys and interviewing guys and finding out how they, you know, tick and what their makeup is. And I think that's a big factor in how they put their teams together, is not just based on raw numbers that, you know, come spitting out of a computer.
Well, and we have a lot of listeners down in the Springfield area, so tell me a couple of people that are going to start the year on the AA roster that we should be looking for.
I think Carson Kelly will be there. That probably, you know, catcher at the moment, you would say he was the heir apparent to Yadier Molina, although, a lot of things could still happen over the course of the time. He had a really good second half of the season in Palm Beach. He's still a young kid. I think he's still only 21, maybe just turned 22, but they signed him out of high school. He has struggled a little bit offensively to come along, but he's a player that they drafted as a third baseman, converted to catching a couple of years ago, actually won the minor league Gold Glove, which they only give out one in all the minor leagues for defensive excellence last year at Palm Beach. So now that he's kind of got the catching thing under control a little bit, which is his primary focus when he changed positions, he's worried about the offense. And as I say, the last couple of months of last season, he kind of came on a little bit down in Palm Beach, which we know is a tough place to hit. Because of it, all the Florida State League parks are tough. So I'm really going to be curious to see if he does, in fact, start at Springfield, which I think he will, how he hits at that level, because that league is a much better hitters league and hitters parks than the Florida State League. And based on the transition that he made, the second half of last season, I'm going to be excited to watch him and his progress. I think he's one guy who'll be at Springfield. They have a lot of good young pitching prospects that were at Palm Beach last year. Luke Weaver's a kid that was a former number one draft pick that had a great year at Palm Beach. I suspect he'll start at AA Springfield. Maybe some of those other guys that Trey Nielsen was a guy who was very good at Palm Beach last year is another guy. The one thing I think is true still about this organization is they probably still have more good pitching prospects than they do hitting prospects. So, they may try to force feed a couple of the hitting guys, to up to Springfield just to kind of spread out some of the talent in the organization. But I think it's still going to be a club that's going to be primarily loaded with more pitching prospects than position player prospects.
Well, and speaking of the top pitching prospect, your book kind of came out at an odd point because it definitely missed the latest trouble that's befallen Alex Reyes. So what do you see about what he's going to be doing here?
I really don't think it's going to be that big of a setback as far as this point. He's suspended for 50 games, which started in the Arizona Fall League, so he's going to miss about the first 6 weeks or so of the 7 weeks maybe of the minor league season. I think he'll be pitching by the 1st of June, and I still think you'll see him in St. Louis in September. But I think hopefully he learns from it. I mean, he was tested positive for smoking marijuana, which one of the fallacies in baseball's drug plan is that, if he'd been on the major league roster, the 40-man roster, he would not have been suspended because you can't test for marijuana at the major league level under the drug plan or the Players Association approves, but you can in the minor league level. So that to me is, I'm not defending what he did, and I'm not saying that it was right or wrong, but to me it's not as significant as a guy who, tested positive for PEDs or something like that. Yeah. So I think hopefully he's still young. He's 21 years old. I know we kind of use that sometimes as a crutch for a player's mistakes. Oh, he's just young, but hopefully it is a young mistake that he will learn from and grow from it, because he's got a tremendous amount of talent. He's not ready yet. He's still refining his secondary pitches and still learning to control all of his pitches, but the raw ability is there for him to be a very successful major league pitcher for a long time. So, they're, working with him and trying to get him to understand that he can't make mistakes. Shelby Miller went through not the same situation as far as, the positive drug test, but some growing up and some learning experiences and things that happened to him when he was in the minor leagues and grew out of that. And I think they're kind of hopeful that this Alex Reyes can do the same thing.
Well, that's exciting, and I'm ready for baseball to get started here. Rob, you've also got a website that covers St. Louis sports. Tell me about that.
Okay, so FCLSportsPage.com. We've been doing it about 5 years now. Cover all the pro sports in St. Louis. So obviously heavy concentration on the Cardinals and the Blues. We'll be in spring training, providing daily reports back out of spring training once the games get underway. And so it's have a lot of fun and put up a lot of interesting content. A lot of Cardinal fans or St. Louis sports fans in general, I think would appreciate it. Also, can follow me on Twitter at Rob Reyes, RAINS, and try to have some interesting stats up on there, especially during the games and stuff once the regular season gets going. So appreciate the plug, and hopefully people will check it out and like what they see.
Well, that's great. Thanks a lot for coming on today, and hope to see you at a ball game soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dale. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Rob Reyes. Pick up his new book. Visit DaleWileyShow.net for links about him and our other guests. Buy some books. Throw some money. Copyright 2016.